This is RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network.
Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, July 1st, 2013. We're into July here. Thursday, of course, is July 4th, Independence Day. We're going to be talking about what that really means as we get into Wednesday here. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today coming in from over the weekend. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Manny is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in here. Now, speaking of the 4th of July, Mayor Bloomberg, who can't really deal with the real problems of New York, unemployment, homelessness, and the rest of it, but he's out there telling you can't have big soft drinks and you can't do this and you can't do that. And now he's out there saying that sparklers need to be banned for the 4th of July because sparklers could be used by terrorists in terror attacks. That's getting a little bit out there, I think, little tiny sparklers. And over at my website, I illustrated this story with a little bit of a graphic about Independence Day in 1963, and everybody's got fireworks, and we've got sparklers and Roman candles and mortar shell and all the rest of that stuff. And today, all we're allowed to have are little party poppers. I'm looking around the supermarkets locally. They're selling 4th of July party supplies, and they got these big boxes with all these packages of celebrate freedom and America, and it's just variations on the theme of the party popper. And they've got them in different shapes and different lengths, but it's all the same thing. You pull a little string, it throws confetti out the end, and that's basically it. And perhaps not too surprisingly, they're not really flying off the shelf, so to speak. I think most Americans are insulted to be celebrating Independence Day with a government that doesn't dare trust them with firecrackers and fountains or anything else here. Oh, you will make do with a party popper and you will be happy with that. No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. But this idea that sparklers need to be banned because they could be used in a terrorist attack is just nonsense. It really, really is. There isn't much. You can burn your finger on a sparkler, and that is pretty much it. The whole point of the commercial fireworks business is these are what they used to call safe and sane fireworks. So if you weren't making your own in your garage, which used to be a thing back when I was a kid here. Alrighty, we're going to get on to Floodgate. A lot of stuff is going on here, and of course the big story continues to be revelations about the NSA spying, and of course the NSA is before Congress saying, oh no, we're really the good guys. We're not doing any of that stuff, and the documents coming out through these repeated leaks are proving exactly the opposite here. Interesting little situation over the weekend when the story came out that the NSA was eavesdropping, spying on our allies in Europe. They were spying on the diplomatic offices of the European Union, Washington, D.C., United Nations, Brussels. Every newspaper in the country ran the story with one notable exception. The Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, sorry, Los Angeles, the New York Times didn't think it was worth reporting. So probably the editorial staff at the New York Times got that late-night phone call, playing back recordings of their little phone calls to Fifi's phone fantasies or some such. But the New York Times is considered the paper of record in the United States, and the fact that they're just sort of blowing off this whole NSA thing is quite revealing. Needless to say, the rest of the world, our allies are very, very angry. Now, it is sort of a given that you will spy on each other's governments. But spying on each other's law-abiding citizens, that sort of crosses a big black line, and everybody's upset about that. We're going to take a break for some commercials here. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we will be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about the NSA spy scandal. They're spying everywhere. They're tapping everybody's telephones. They're probably tapping the phones here at RBN. Let me pick up a handset and see. Yeah, they're tapping our phones. Anyway, getting back to the reaction in Europe to the NSA spy scandal, France has issued a statement. They want the United States to immediately cease all spying activities on the people of France. Now, people inside government, inside the military, spying is just a fact of life. But this crosses a line into spying on ordinary law-abiding citizens. And French President Francois Hollande is saying that this spy scandal is a major threat to all of the pending treaties regarding trade. And he is absolutely correct, because the United States, going back to that Seattle Apex scandal, the United States has a track record of spying on law-abiding businessmen to steal secrets from them in order to give to political cronies. And you can't be having negotiations about fair trade where you've got the party that you're negotiating with is spying into your private communications to try and gain some kind of an advantage. And that's why so many people are offended by this, because up until now, most people could lull themselves into a false sense of security that, oh yeah, the NSA is plugged into all the systems and the phones, but they're only spying on the bad people, and because I am not a bad person, the NSA isn't spying on me. And now all of a sudden they're waking up to the realization, yeah, they are. And worse, this government has a track record of nefarious use of the information they're stealing. Stuff they can blackmail you with, put pressure on you with, which may have been the reason for Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts to do his 180 on Obamacare, stealing your business plans so they can run off to their broker and gain a financial edge in stock trading. It's called insider trading. It is illegal, and they're doing it. And so these other countries are very, very angry. Not that they're spying government to government, but that our government is spying on their ordinary citizens. Germany is actually going to bring charges in the international court against Britain and the United States over this bugging. This is not how you're supposed to treat allies. Now, interestingly enough, Valerie Plame and Joe Wilson have gone public saying that this whole scandal with the NSA has nothing to do with Snowden. They're just trying to use Snowden to personify this so they can attack Snowden and make the scandal go away. And Valerie Plame and Joe Wilson are saying this has to do with the intelligence industrial complex going completely out of control. And they're absolutely right. Now, a little bit of a historical note for people who may not recognize those names. Back when the United States government was out there screaming that Saddam had nuclear weapons and they were importing yellow cake uranium from Niger, former Ambassador Joe Wilson went over there on a fact-finding trip, and he came back and said this story about the yellow cake is a complete hoax. Now, the Bush White House didn't want to hear that, because Bush, in his 2003 State of the Union, had said, we have evidence Iraq is importing yellow cake refined uranium from Niger, and it must be for bad purposes. And the fact that Iraq had their own internal uranium ore and didn't need to be importing anything sort of blew right past the corporate media without notice. So in order to try and discredit Joe Wilson, the Bush White House leaked to the media the fact that Joe Wilson's wife, Valerie Plame, was an agent of the Central Intelligence Agency, and that this whole fact-finding trip by Joe Wilson was really something for the CIA and had nothing to do with the official U.S. government, so pay no attention to him. In the process, not only did they destroy Valerie Plame's career, because now it's known she was a CIA agent, they destroyed the organization she was working for, Brewster, Jennings and Associates, which was a CIA proprietary whose job it was to keep track of nuclear weapons in the third world. And completely destroyed that, and nobody wanted to talk to them anymore. Now, it's interesting, when the White House leaks an intelligence secret that destroys careers, that shuts down a major asset for tracking nuclear weapons, nothing ever happened to them. Bush and Cheney didn't have to run off and hide in the Moscow airport, did they? Kind of a double standard when it comes to leaks. You know, leaks that help the White House, those are good, and leaks that harm and discredit the government, those are bad. Nancy Pelosi is out there saying protecting the NSA is equal to protecting the Constitution. That is the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard in my life, because the NSA spying is a complete defying of the Constitution. You don't protect the Constitution by throwing it in the shredder. And that's what Nancy Pelosi says. Oh, yeah, we've got to protect the NSA because that's going to protect the Constitution. The NSA right now is one of the biggest enemies of the Constitution we see on planet Earth right now. They're circling the wagons. They're coming out with these nonsensical statements trying to contain the damage here. Susan Rice is out there saying the Snowden leaks will not hurt Obama's presidency or U.S. foreign policy. Really, there's no big deal. You shouldn't pay attention any longer. And, of course, the damage has already been done. America's allies are furious over this affront to their privacy. And yes, it has already damaged Obama's presidency. You can tell that from his rapidly declining poll numbers. And they're just out there just trying to say, it's no big deal. Really, there's nothing there. They're panicking. You can just smell the panicking. There's a new wrinkle that has come out over this whole signals intelligence sharing. Apparently, this NSA and British spying on everybody's phone calls in the world is where Obama is getting his little death list for the drone strikes. And they're now saying, maybe we're not stopping terror attacks, but we're finding the bad people to kill with drone strikes. Except that it's already been admitted at least 25% of the targets of Obama's drone strikes have actually been innocent of any wrongdoing against the U.S. government, let alone the average of 50 innocent civilians standing around who get killed with every one of these drone strikes. What are they doing? Going out there and bombing anybody who says anything bad about the United States? Oh, I'm tired of the way the United States is trying to take over our government. Ah, there's a target for a drone strike. That's not a reason to kill somebody for saying they're not happy with the U.S. coming into their country. And yet they seem to be treating it like that. And there's another aspect to all of this. We know here in the United States of America, NSA has been sharing their intelligence take with various large corporations. You say something bad about, for example, Monsanto, your name goes on a list and Monsanto knows you are one of their enemies. Are they also doing this in Europe? Are large European corporations being given information gleaned by this spying, so they know who is a potential troublemaker when they put out their next new product that may not be 100% safe or even marginally effective? And like I said, most Americans sort of got along thinking that, all this spy technology is okay because we've seen the James Bond movies and we watched 24, and all this spying is only directed at the bad people. They would never use it on the law-abiding people. Well, yeah, they are. And this kind of systematic surveillance of law-abiding citizens is not the republic. It is not democracy. It is a clear sign of dictatorship. It's on the same moral level as the Stasi in East Germany, the Gestapo under the Nazis, KGB and GRU under the Soviet Union. We're there. We are there. Now, apparently, the current estimate is that the NSA is snooping on 500 million German data connections every single day. That's a lot. That's not a list of potential suspects. They're watching everybody. Now, a document has surfaced containing a list of all the code names for the NSA spy operation. We already know a few of them, PRISM, and so forth. And I'm looking at this list. It is a huge list of names. Let me just give you a few of these things here. AgileView, Agility, AirGap, AIG Handler, Anchory, Arcan, Artemis, Association, AutoSource, Beamer, Bellevue, Black Pearl. Heard about that one already. I'm going to skip on down. Coastline, Cineplex, Convergence, Creek, Crossbones, Double Arrow, Dragonfly, FastScope, Glaive, Gold Point, Gossamer, InfoShare, Liquid Fire, Marina, Messiah, Nucleon, Ravenwing, Roadbed, Surrey, Trickler, Tuscatire, Twisted Path, Wireshark. It's a huge list of programs, and there are two things that occur to me looking at that. How much needless and costly duplication of effort is going on, and in what is probably good news for the American people, how much inefficiency is created trying to coordinate anything meaningful from data coming from so many disparate sources. And remember, a lot of this data mining they're doing is coming off of social media. That's not a reliable source of raw intelligence. People exaggerate on Facebook, especially if they're trying to find, a hot date for the weekend. Yes, I'm a senior manager at my company, and turns out the guy's, you know, plunging the toilets or something. It's not reliable. Now, another little piece of information has finally come out. We've been talking about the Foreign Intelligence Service Act court that supposedly makes this unconstitutional activity constitutional, which is nonsense. Marbury versus Madison. Laws repugnant to the Constitution are automatically null and void. But we now have the name of the judge who basically rubber stamped all of this spying on you. Her name is Colleen Kolar Kotelly, or Kotelly. I'm not sure of the emphasis on the wrong syllable. So now we have a name there. And you know something? Judges are not allowed to authorize unconstitutional behavior. Just because a judge says it's so doesn't make it so. And we are not obligated to accept this assault on our privacy rights. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're getting this story out of, let's see, this is over at 1800politics.com, where more of these documents that have been released have shown that the NSA was collecting your email for at least 2 years under the Obama administration. So efforts to say, oh, this really all goes back to Bush, we had nothing to do with it, is complete nonsense. Obama could have pulled the plug on all of this when he came into office, and he did not. Ooh. Now, for some reason, I mean, there's a lot of rumor mongering going on, a lot of disinformation, a lot of junk being put out. And over the weekend, in fact, it was late yesterday, somebody was putting out the rumor that Edward Snowden had applied formally for political asylum in Russia. And this was being seized on by people to say, see, it's all a Russian plot. Snowden is really working for our enemies. He's not a do-gooder whistleblower. He is trying to harm the country on behalf of our enemies in Russia. And John McCain was so excited he almost fell off his stool, you know, foaming at the mouth and screaming about Russia and China. But Russia has now basically come out and said, absolutely not. Edward Snowden is not applying for political asylum in Russia. Russia, frankly, would like to get rid of him because they can see people like John McCain out there trying to use this to build hostility to Russia ahead of invading Russia because they dared take control of their central bank. Now, an interesting story came out over the weekend. This was in the Daily Mail. And as a result of all this growing awareness of NSA spying on pretty much everything that we're doing, they're already finding an increasing use of encryption online. People are developing code systems in order to secure their data. What was really very interesting, they're talking about a couple of cases. This originated with Wired.com. And it turns out they were looking at situations where there were real criminals and there were appropriate warrants to be wiretapping their communication, and they're finding more and more of these criminals are using encryption. And what's really amazing is that out of the 15 wiretaps they studied, 4 of the wiretaps were encrypted in a manner that the government was unable to decode. Now, this underscores what I have been saying previously, that all of this U.S. government spying is aimed at law-abiding citizens who, up until now, did not think they had to worry about their privacy. And I suspect that the success the government had in breaking the encryption of the majority of those intercepts was based on the fact people were using off-the-shelf encryption, something they bought at the App Store, something they got online, where the methodology is already known to the NSA. If it doesn't have a built-in backdoor, as we've now documented so many of these encryption systems do. And it underscores the fact, if you're developing your own codes with your own methodology, the NSA can't do a thing about it. Even with all their computers, if they don't know the method, they are up the creek without the paddle. I would not be surprised if our paranoid U.S. government were to declare that use of any encryption will be a crime. And it's not a new idea. Back when they were trying to foist DES and Clipper on us, they were talking about, you know, these are the approved encryption systems you will use, and it will be a crime to use any other. And then we found out, of course, the official implementation of DES had the work reduction packet in it, where your encryption key is provided along with the message to NSA. Clipper had the law enforcement assistant field, which was a different name for exactly the same thing, your encryption key buried in the message so they could simply take it out and read your traffic. And I'm willing to bet a plugged Turkish piaster that we're going to see a hue and cry in Congress that, encryption by the American people cannot be allowed. It will impede the war on terror. It'll impede the war on drugs. Well, terrorists and drug dealers are already using strong encryption of their own design. And this article that we got from Wired underscores that. Even on these legal wiretaps, encryption is increasing, and they're not able to read it all. A lot of people are here calling for, this is over on reallibertymedia.com, dump Skype, piss off the NSA, and I think we probably all should have been suspicious at how this Skype tool was being provided for free to everybody. Yeah, sure, here's a nice little communication. We'll give it to you for free, and you will just use it and become dependent on it. And yes, we do use it here to transmit my radio show from Oahu to Texas. But it's now known, yeah, it's backdoored along with everything else, which isn't a problem for me because I'm broadcasting a radio show on here. They don't need the back door. And I'm not dumb enough to use Skype to communicate anything that I wish to keep hidden and private. But I think we're probably going to see a lot of user-developed, crowdsourced tools come up to start replacing all of this stuff that is now under suspicion as being part of this NSA spy network. Now, over the weekend, a good friend of mine put me onto a very interesting Firefox plugin called Track Me Not. And when we come back from this commercial break, I will go into this at depth. It's a cool idea. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about this plugin that's been developed for Firefox, and my guess is there will soon be one like it for every browser out there. And it's called Track Me Not. And it's a browser extension you put in there. And what it does is, several times an hour, and you can choose how often it does it, it goes out to the RSS feed on the New York Times, and it can also work from a list of your own words, and it will execute a Google search for that randomly selected word, and then block the return coming back because it's just junk. But the idea being that if the NSA is monitoring your Google searches, they have no idea what you're really searching for, because they're getting a flood of searches for things like shag carpeting, Syria, Egypt, where the news headlines are going on, cookie recipes, whatever. They don't know what's a real search. And it's a way of jamming up the system. We can't stop them from listening to us. They're going to listen and spy on everything we can do. What we can do is undermine the reliability and credibility of any data they're developing. And so this plugin came out. I've already got it on my Firefox, and I haven't noticed any system degradation. I think it's a really good idea, because what the NSA is doing is unconstitutional, and we, the people, are fully justified in taking whatever steps we deem to be necessary to protect our privacy against a government that has a track record of stealing your personal data for their own personal gain. We live in a country where the government is one of the biggest criminals that is out there, and we have to protect ourselves from that. Now, little flashback history here. Something you may or may not have heard of, but I want to tell you a story. This happened a long time ago as part of Operation MK Ultra. And for those of you who don't remember, MK were the initials of a Nazi program to develop mind control technology. And at the end of the war, the United States, even as they're saying, ooh, bad Nazis, they're copying everything the Nazis did and bringing it to the United States of America, and they took the MK program from the Nazis and turned it into MK Ultra. And there's a funny little story about one of the many programs under MK Ultra called Operation Midnight Climax. You can see where this is going already. Over in San Francisco, the CIA ran 3 houses that were set up as sex pads with shag carpeting, pornographic pictures on the wall, huge beds, lots of lights. And the CIA, using your taxpayer dollars, hired a whole bunch of prostitutes to work for the CIA to go out and just pick up men, bring them back to the sex pad for sex and drugs, some of which, like LSD, were administered without the test subjects knowing. These are U.S. citizens we're talking about. that were being given LSD by the CIA without their knowledge and permission. And they were trying to basically find the right combination of kinky sex and drugs, where these guys would just start talking about their most deepest, darkest personal secrets in order to develop techniques that could be used in interrogation of foreign government officials, foreign CEOs, whatever they wanted to go after. And this Operation Midnight Climax ran for 9 years, until following the Bay of Pigs, the CIA was told to clean up its house, and the CIA said, we probably ought to shut this one down. And during those 9 years, the CIA operatives lived this non-stop wild party of kinky sex and drugs straight out of the pages of Penthouse Variations, all paid for by you, the taxpayer. And in the end, the stated objective of discovering the correct mixture of sex and drugs that would pry secrets from the targets was never met. They didn't develop anything of use from this entire program. And at the time, MK-Ultra was 6% of the CIA's entire operating budget, none of which had any congressional oversight. Congress didn't even know this was going on. Huge waste of money. And some of these people who were given these drugs without their permission, they got damaged by it. So if you think this NSA spying on all of your communications is a totally passive operation, you might want to think again, because clearly the spooks enjoy messing with people, messing with you, the American taxpayer. And so the time has come to ask, along with all, what communications the NSA has been monitoring, it's time to start asking what communications are being tampered with in subtle ways to gain the government an advantage. For example, how hard would it be for NSA to artificially inflate reader and viewer numbers for media outlets that support the government, while deflating the numbers for media outlets that challenge the status quo? And I've gotten email from other webmasters of other blogs saying that the readership numbers assigned to them by these various online web rating agencies seemed inconsistent, not only from web rating agency to web rating agency, but also with their own server logs. The NSA could be in there as you send a bid to a client. They could change that bid a little bit so the contract goes to their buddies. And unless you're asking people to send your bid back for verification of the numbers in there, you would never know. There's all kinds of little mischief they could be doing to throw business to their buddies and take business away from their enemies. We're not talking about simply blocking emails. That's too obvious. But they could change the wording of an email to something that might actually slightly offend the person you're sending it to in order to discourage communication. There's all kinds of stuff here. Now, speaking of safe houses and drugs and prostitutes and kinky sex and all the rest of that stuff, they should make a movie out of it. There probably somewhere there's a porn movie detailing all of this stuff. The ATF apparently set up a phony drug house, stash house, and then put the word out on the street, oh, this house is full of drugs and full of money, to try and lure people in to try and knock it off. It's another entrapment, like where the FBI goes out and says, oh, hi, I'm going to blow up a building, here's a bunch of money if you'll help me, and they say, well, I can use the money, boom, they're arrested. That's entrapment. That's not stopping a crime in progress. That's not arresting the criminals. That's creating a crime and then arresting anybody who shows any interest in it. And that is not law enforcement. That is propaganda. All righty. We're going to grab a phone call here. Mike in Kentucky. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I think what we're talking about is the technocracy. I think that's been warned about for some time, where the technology is used to suppress or foment fads and things like that. I put it to a guy from Nielsen and Arbitron years ago that his job was pretty much already obsolete, since apparently they were able to listen in on what people's entertainment choices were, and at home or in the car, probably 16, 17 years ago by my estimate, with talking with some of these technicians that installed the equipment way before nobody knew about room 641A when I had first had some hints at that going on. But newspapers want to know the readership. They survey you and want to know your income and how many people's in the households and all that stuff. So MTV, I think you might have had it on your webpage, got caught manipulating the blogosphere years ago with fake online bloggers promoting the grunge bands or the supposed alternative bands. Now, that only involves an economy of scale of, what, a few hundred million in record sales maybe. That's been 10, 12 years ago. Do you think there's not a lot more economic incentive for the government to manipulate things when it comes
not
to...
Not just for the government, but for the record promoters from the movie companies. I mean, if you go over, I'll give you a benign example. If you go over to RottenTomatoes.com, which is supposed to be a website for ordinary moviegoers to, share information about movies with each other, and you'll read some of these reviews on some of these films, and you will very quickly learn to recognize the positives all sound like they're written by a movie studio PR department. and it's not language ordinary people use when they're saying, I saw this movie, it's great. And all of a sudden you see somebody who's, a hired poster over at Rotten Tomatoes, and they're like a film critic wannabe, and they go on at length about, all the film's merits. And after a while, it's very, very obvious that they're loading this up. Public relations firms in this country openly advertise the service, where for a fee, they will send their operatives into whatever website you want to try and load it up with statements in favor of whatever your particular product, service, or politics happen to be, while pretending to be ordinary people. So we know there's a great deal of government and corporate fraud on the Internet. I've lost count of the number of politicians who've been caught artificially rigging and inflating their followers on Facebook and or is it Twitter or one of these things. It's really alarmingly easy to do, and as a result, nobody pays attention to those numbers anymore anyway.
Well, you hope not. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of folks that do follow the herd, but this is just newer technology. It's been going on for a long time with these fake video news releases where it looks like the local anchor at a local TV station is interviewing some celebrity, and it's all canned, and he's got the questions pre-prepared for him. And
yes,
and I've got a copy of it, the TV Guide from 1992, which dealt with all the public relations fakery around Desert Storm.
Mm-hmm.
With a fake woman testifying that she saw the babies being thrown out the incubator.
The stolen incubator story, and that was all done by Hill and
technology.
Yeah, it was all
doing the same.
Public relations is a polite word for being paid to lie to the American people, and it's a big business in this country. It's one of the few businesses still doing really well in this economy. It's a growth industry. The more governments and corporations need to lie, the more they're going to hire these public relations firms to try and convince you that Monsanto GMO is good for you, vaccines would never hurt you, the president loves you, the media is honest, the Arabs are bad, so forth.
Thanks for taking my call.
All right, you got it. We're going to switch over to Kurt in Michigan. Aloha, Kurt. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, just got a lot of concerns about the NSA program that's going on. Calling every representative I can that, like you were talking about Nancy Pelosi earlier, basically saying that the NSA program should be protected just like the Constitution of the United States, and it drove me nuts to hear that.
Well, what she's saying is basically protecting the NSA is protecting the Constitution. Talk about Orwellian speak. I've got to add it to my list of, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, war is peace, protecting the NSA is protecting the Constitution, warming is cooling, and all these various other Orwellian doublespeaks we're being subjected to right now.
Yeah, I've been calling other representatives outside my state as well, just to let them know that a lot of people are angry. I don't know what else to do about it other than, call and let them know. And the thing is like Nancy Pelosi, I called her a little bit ago, and I told her about that. I said, the thing is basically the NSA program, that you're violating the Constitution of the United States. So maybe, someone like that should go to North Korea or something like that and live over there. And so we don't need people like that here. And basically said a lot of angry people are getting more and more angry.
Well, that's certainly...
And the thing is I don't know what more to do other than just to call and voice my opinion.
Well, what you need to do, first of all, voicing your opinion to the politicians is probably not going to have much of a response. They're completely co-opted. They're just as afraid of their ill deeds being made public. That's how they're going to be controlled. But you are justified, certainly, in talking to your friends and neighbors and family about what's going on, and you're probably going to find, as I do, everybody's very, very angry about this. And the other thing you can do is there is no law that says you cannot take steps to protect your privacy from the government. And again, this is not an issue of whether you're doing something illegal or not. It's a matter of principle and the Fourth Amendment. The government has no business looking into your life unless they have evidence you're engaged in a crime. And anything that you can do to protect your privacy, unplugging from the wall, getting off of social media, you know, stop going to Facebook, stop going to MySpace, you just start delinking from all of that stuff, go back to the human net, is going to protect your privacy, especially if you're in business, you're developing a new product, or you're inventing something, you're an entrepreneur. The last thing you need is some loser over at the NSA getting a hold of your idea and then rushing off to patent it before you do, to steal it from you. And again, we've caught the government doing this stuff.
Right. Well, you know, when I called Nancy Pelosi as well, because I don't like to leave a voicemail. I like to talk to a staff member. I like to talk to an actual person. And the thing is I told her, you know, I said basically, the people that are holding office today that are basically going against the Constitution of the United States. I said once the American people take back this country, I said a lot of these people that are in office today are going to find themselves being brought up eventually on criminal charges in court.
Well, after the collapse of this government and the formation of a new one, certainly that's going to happen. Not out of revenge, but out of creating a credible deterrent for future officials. You do not violate that Constitution. That was your contract with America, and you're in breach of contract.
Right, and I've explained it to many representatives that I have called. I said, just like any other contract out there, once you breach that contract, that contract is no longer a contract between the people and the government anymore. I said, once, like I've heard you say many a times, you know, once they breach that Constitution, they're an illegitimate government.
That's exactly right. And we are not obligated to obey their dictates and pay their bills, and certainly not sacrifice the lives of our children in their pointless wars of conquest. You know what? I imagine that Richard Nixon, if he were still alive, would be feeling very put out right now. He only got caught bugging 2 buildings, and he had to resign. Here we have Obama bugging the entire planet, and he's still up there smiling and saying, yes, I'm doing good.
Yeah, it just seems like this president gets away with anything and everything.
It does. It's very alarming, and you know, he sort of gets into that habit of being able to do whatever he wants, and that's obviously a danger sign. What is it? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking my call.
You got it. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. And speaking of Richard Nixon, remember one of the articles of impeachment against Nixon was that he used the IRS to target his political enemies. And now it is coming out, this is reported over at Ex-Republic TV, 100% of the Tea Party groups applying for nonprofit status were targeted by the Internal Revenue Service. 100%. This idea that, oh, their number just came up in a random... No, it's complete nonsense. Political opponents to the administration were being intentionally targeted by the IRS. Do you really think the IRS did that on their own recognizance? Of course not. They know it's illegal. They know it's a crime. They wouldn't do it unless somebody at the top gave the order. We're going to take a break for commercials here. When we come back, we're going to be talking about the turmoil over there in Egypt and some dimensions to it that the corporate media seems to kind of not be paying attention to. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And backing up a little bit, we're getting an update again on this story about Snowden seeking asylum in Russia, because first it was announced, then it was denied, now it's back to being announced again, and we're getting this story over here in The Guardian saying that Putin is now floating the idea that Snowden can stay in Russia if he stops bringing harm to our American partners. And what Putin is trying to do here is defuse this hue and cry from people like John McCain trying to claim that this is a gigantic Russian plot. And McCain's attempt to do this is now backflashing, because if Snowden stays in Russia, There may be no more public pronouncements about what the NSA is doing around the world, but it's a sure bet Russia will know all the inside, low down, and dirty. So Putin's a chess player. And against a good chess player like Putin, the United States, which has more of a poker mindset of bluff and bluster, they're losing continuously against this situation. All righty, let's see. Moving right along here. We're going to talk about Egypt. Last week they were showing all these anti-Morsi protesters, and it was just a small crowd, and then all of a sudden over the weekend the crowds began to expand and expand, and they've been showing pictures all over. Oh, they all hate Morsi, they all hate Morsi, until you go to the Egyptian media or even the European media and you start seeing that most of the people in those crowds are carrying anti-American banners and placards. And a lot of Egyptians are thinking that Morsi has catered a little too much to U.S. interests, especially with his signing on board getting rid of Assad in Syria. And that has provoked a huge reaction. Now, the latest word we have right now is Egypt's military is saying unless Morsi and the opposition come to a peaceful agreement within 48 hours, they are simply going to take control of the country. And my guess is, based on those anti-American posters and placards we're seeing in that rapidly expanding crowd, it's going to be less pro-America even than Morsi was. And so if this was, in fact, a repeat of Iran in 1953 or Chile in 1973, it was an attempt to overthrow Morsi to put a more pro-U.S. government in place, this looks to be backfiring major league on the United States of America, because the military will not be pro-U.S. So this could turn out to be another major foreign policy disaster for the United States of America. And again, the problem is they're still playing the game by the rules that worked in 1953 and 1973. But the world has changed very dramatically since then. The fundamental nature of information flow through society is drastically different. And a lot of these old Cold War fossils still calling the shots in Washington, D.C. just don't seem to get it. All righty. Let's see. Oh, we got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And for those of you watching on Justin TV, I'm waving my little laser pointer around the office here and zapping Dandy the Lion and my handsome face up on the back wall there. And I'm doing that to illustrate a point. If you remember, over the last several years, we've been getting this constant tirade from the U.S. government that powerful hand lasers are a danger, they're a threat. And I remember one time I tried to buy one of these laser pointers for a physics experiment I was working on relative to the Big Bang. And it was confiscated by U.S. Customs as it came in from China. And I turned around and I located an American manufacturer and I bought pretty much the exact same unit, same power, here locally, which obviously I'm holding here in my hand. And they're making this big thing about, oh, flashing a laser at an airplane, and they put people in jail for doing this, with this idea that somehow a little handheld laser beam was going to destroy aircraft in the sky. Now, first of all, these are not real lasers in the sense of a truly coherent beam of light. If you take the lens off, the beam just fans out. It's monochromatic, but it's not coherent like the classic gas tube or ruby rod laser would be. And they do spread out. They look very narrow, but when you're like a quarter of a mile away, it's already spread out to 100 feet across. They're not effective weapons. And the proof of that is, looking at the footage coming from these Egyptian protests, the protesters have laser pointers, and they're pointing them at all the overflying aircraft, and not a single aircraft has been brought down. There hasn't even been a complaint from the pilots, oh, I'm blinded, I can't fly anymore. It's simply not working. And it's another case of the government trying to make a crisis over something we want to have to play with. Laser pointers are dangerous. No, they're not. Unless you point them in your own eye, and obviously nobody's going to do that any more than you'd put a sharp stick in your own eye. Please allow us to have some common sense with these things. And so when I was looking at the footage from Egypt, that's the first thing I noticed. They're flashing laser pointers all over the place, and the buildings are still standing, and people are still protesting, and the helicopters and aircraft are still flying overhead completely unmolested. This idea that laser pointers are a danger, Probably some congressman's nephew was put in charge of the department of we must take the laser pointers away from the American people. Dictatorship is one thing, but a dictatorship that is interfering in stuff that doesn't need to be interfered with? Phew, talk about government waste here. Now, an interesting story came out of 12160 pointing out the fact that 25% of Egyptians have signed a petition to remove Morsi from office and to have an immediate election to find his replacement. The replacement coming from a list of pre-U.S. approved candidates. Obviously, if the military takes over, that whole thing has gone out the window. And this article over at 12160 is saying, you know, would 25% of Americans support Obama's impeachment? And so, of course, we ran our own poll over at whatreallyhappened.com, and we came up with 95%. The question was, would you support the impeachment and removal from office of Obama? 95% said yes. So we're already past Egypt at this point in terms of dislike of our current regime here. And I don't think it's helped matters that Obama, on his whirlwind $100 million tour of Africa, is out there handing out your tax dollars like confetti. He's pledged $7 billion to upgrade Africa's electrical power infrastructure, paid for by American taxpayers who are dealing with a crumbling power infrastructure in this country. And someone needs to remind Obama, his job is to take care of the United States of America, our roads, our bridges, our schools, our hospitals. He is not authorized by the Constitution to spend Americans' tax money making improvements to his ancestral lands. We'll be back after these words from our sponsor. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And along with handing out billions and billions of your dollars, I'm starting to sound like Carl Sagan, billions and billions of taxpayer dollars wafting across the Atlantic to Africa to rebuild their power infrastructure. And at the same time, Obama is over there selling the idea of U.S. investment in African agriculture. And he's trying to pitch it that Africa's agriculture is being neglected. It doesn't have the attention. If we're going to fight global hunger, we have to take the fight to Africa where it's the forefront of global development, blah, 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 blah. What he's talking about is setting things up so that large American corporations can buy up Africa's farmland in order to monopolize food production on the entire continent. That's what he's talking about. And I'm all in favor of fighting hunger, but we have hunger here in the United States of America. No government has a right to spend a single penny of taxpayer money on other countries while Americans are sleeping in alleys and eating out of trash dumpsters. How dare the Congress and the President play generous benefactor to insert name of country here with our money, while record numbers of Americans are going hungry. Shame on you. Shame on you. Now, over in Beijing, they're having problems up in Xinjiang. A lot of protests going on there, ethnic clashes. Things are just fanning up over there. They've apparently 200 people have died in total of all of these riots going on there. Down in Brazil, a little bit of good news, and this is probably why this has dropped off the corporate media feed here in the United States. Down in Brazil, dealing with their riots there over the tremendous wealth inequality that is going on, the austerity, banker predations, the Brazilian police have stopped fighting the protesters. And they've joined them. The police are now marching with the protesters against the government of Brazil and the bankers. A little piece of good news there. Now, over the weekend, there was this bizarre story that showed up on the internet and got a lot of play over there, how Obama and Putin, in the midst of screaming at each other about Syria, had somehow arranged a deal where Russia would send troops to the United States to help put down an American rebellion. And the story, everywhere I saw this, it all tracks back to a report from Saoirse Fall, who is a known disinformation source. What the U.S. and Russia agreed to do was have a coordination between the two countries in the event of a natural disaster, which certainly would have helped those people under Hurricane Katrina or Storm Sandy or the rest of it. But there is absolutely no way Russia is going to send their troops to the United States to put down a rebellion by the American people for one simple reason. Putin sees the American people as his strongest ally to keep the U.S. government from escalating this world war into a full-on global nuclear conflict. Putin is not going to help the United States government continue its war policy by keeping the American people subjugated. It's just not going to happen. Now, I'm noticing that after the obligatory, oh, Egypt's going to fall and the rest of it, certainly on Fox News since the start of my show today, it's been almost non-stop coverage of the Zimmerman trial. It's getting all this coverage with everything that's going on in the world. Egypt, Syria, all the rest of it. This one murder case is being promoted as the most important story for you, the American people. And I am very concerned because it seems like every new prosecution witness that is put forward turns out to be a gift wrap present to the defense team. The witness who couldn't read cursive, the witness they've already got caught in perjury. Now they're showing all these reenactment videos, which may or may not have any basis in fact. It's just what they want you to think is going on. Many, many years ago, when I was still doing computer animation, I got approached by some local lawyers to do a simulation of something they were litigating, and it quickly became clear they wanted me to present something that was not accurate and true and factual, and then sit on the stand and say, yes, I did this simulation, and it's absolutely true, and I wouldn't do that. So I basically walked away from that. My concern here is we are seeing as much of a giveaway to the defense in this case as we saw up in Sylmar during the trial of the 4 police officers accused of beating Rodney King. And that was an absolute giveaway to the defense there when the judge instructed the jury that unless they could agree on which specific blow of the baton the police exceeded their authority, then they would have to acquit them all, which is, of course, what happened, and it triggered the riots in Los Angeles, Operations Cable Splice and Garden Plot, federalization of the National Guard, and I think we may be looking at a repeat, because remember, this Thursday there was supposed to be this armed march into Washington, D.C. with Adam Kokesh and his followers, and it basically cratered when everybody in the country said, are you kidding? You are giving the government every excuse they need to demonize gun owners, to declare a national emergency, to go on about their gun grabbing. And so we could be seeing a plan B, because there's been all this talk all over the internet and all over the social media. If Zimmerman's let go, there will be race riots. It'll be horrible. And it's classic government divide and conquer. They can't deal with a united American people angry over Floodgate, austerity, banker bailouts, all the rest of that. I just got a text message. CNN is doing all Zimmerman all the time, too. So they're selling this thing. They're selling this thing. And my concern is that when Zimmerman is acquitted, which seems to be the writing on the wall, that infiltrators, informants, agents in place inside the United States are going to go around saying, we've got to burn this, we've got to burn that, we've got to have riots. And then the U.S. government will have their excuse to declare a national emergency, suspend the Constitution, start confiscating the guns, and say, whoa, boy, we don't have to deal with those American people anymore. They're completely disarmed. They'll do what we tell them to do. And that means more money and more babies for war. And I'm very, very concerned at a potential plan by the U.S. government to incite race riots using their undercover informants in order to bring about this transformation of the United States into a country where we, the American people, have no choice but to do as we're told. Surrender your guns, surrender your gold, surrender your children. That's what makes America great, or whatever it is they're going to say. So, if you are a member of any of the involved minority groups that form the so-called controversy over the Zimmerman case, don't fall for it. If Zimmerman is acquitted, just say, oh well, and recognize that that person in your midst who's making Molotov cocktails and saying, we got to go burn Whitey, is probably working for the United States government. Go back and look how the U.S. government undermined and destroyed the Black Panthers and the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. This government wants us fighting against ourselves so we don't unite to fight against our oppressors. I can't put it more clearly than that. It smells like a setup. Please share with your friends in your social network that the threat of riots after the Zimmerman case looks to be an engraved invitation for the U.S. government to take away what remains of our civil rights. Don't fall for it. Don't be as dumb as the U.S. government hopes you are. Spread that around. That's your homework for this week. All right, over in Syria, this is being reported over at the Ugly Truth. Syrian Christians are saying, why is America at war with us? And this follows hard on the heels of yet more videos of these hired mercenaries slaughtering Christian clergy in very brutal manner that continue to embarrass this whole covert attempt at overthrowing Assad. Here in the United States, of course, Obama is facing a major political backlash over his attempt to arm, directly arm, as opposed to covertly arming these Syrian hired mercenaries. And over in the House of Representatives, no less than 3 separate bills have been introduced that would block funds to arm the Syrian hired mercenaries and prevent the administration from intervening without congressional approval. And they are absolutely legally correct to do so, because under the Constitution, only Congress can declare a war. Under the War Powers Act, the President can deploy U.S. military forces to deal with a threat to the United States of America. But Syria isn't threatening the United States of America. Syria isn't threatening anybody. Syria is trying to kick out a covert attempt at an overthrow. Now, in response to these House bills, Senator John McCain, who never met a war he didn't like, is out there screaming that the United States must send weapons to Syria because it's the only way to keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. I'm not even sure how he can come up with that linkage. What's going on in Syria got to do with Iran? Iran is not dependent on Syria for money or technological advice or even raw materials. The two are completely unconnected. But McCain is trying to link them, and once more shows us that the real agenda with Syria is to take it over as the last stepping stone to that long lusted for war against Iran. Now, meanwhile, up in Iraq, things are not going very well up there. The head of the Sadr Trend, Muqtada al-Sadr, stated, the next Iraqi prime minister will not deal with the United States. They're basically saying, we're sick and tired of the interference. You've got Saddam. You've got the non-existent nuclear weapons. Leave us alone. The U.S. ambassador to Iraq said the USA will have a different stance with Iraq if the next PM rejects a deal with us. In other words, we'll invade you a second time. I'd like to see how they're going to sell that one to the American people. Oh, they've got a Death Star. They've got a Death Star. We've got to invade them all over again. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, Secretary of State John Kerry just finished his visit to Israel and said it was very positive, and they made real progress. And Mr. Kerry's nose is growing because Kerry did not get any deal in place to restart the peace talks between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, which was supposed to be the whole point of his visit. And the Palestinian officials are saying they're not any closer to a breakthrough because of Kerry's visit. Israel doesn't want peace talks, they want Palestine. And to sort of express their displeasure over this whole thing, Israel, as soon as Kerry was on his way to the airport, announced yet another expansion of the illegal settlements, this time in occupied East Jerusalem's Har Homa. The Likud officials were defiant, saying Kerry's visit would not prevent them from continuing to build settlement units on other people's land. Now remember, the United Nations has issued numerous resolutions trying to remind Israel that Jerusalem is a shared city. It is important to 3 religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And they're all supposed to have their portion of it. But Israel says, we want it all. It's all ours. The imaginary playmate in the sky says it's ours, which is also what the Islam imaginary playmate in the sky is saying and the Christian imaginary playmate in the sky is saying, and that's why there's so much blood soaking into the ground out there. But the reality is that, again, under international law, Israel is not supposed to be building any settlements at all in the occupied West Bank territories because it is not part of Israel. Everything they're doing is in defiance of international law. Now, we've been talking about some of the dirty tricks the illegal settlers like to do to the Palestinians, run their raw sewage from the settlements into the water supply of the Palestinians to contaminate it and try and drive them off here. And apparently down in Gaza, their aquifer is starting to run out. Now, of course, to the CEO of Nestle, that's a profit opportunity because he doesn't think there ought to be a natural right to water for humans and that water should be commoditized and you should pay for your water. Next, it's going to be air. If you want to breathe today, you have to send in your monthly breathing license fee. But there's going to be another humanitarian disaster in Gaza as they're running out of water. And Israel does not allocate water in the area to the Palestinians here. Been another story over here in Jerusalem. Apparently settlers attacked 2 Palestinian school buses, threw rocks at them, carrying Palestinian children. As Ron White says, you got to be a real manly man to throw rocks at children. Another little story, this came out of The Ugly Truth. Apparently there's been a case where 9 Israeli teenage boys are suspected of raping a 12-year-old girl. The lawyer for the boys is saying the girl seduced all of these guys into doing this. All righty, we're going to grab a phone call here. John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I have to disagree with you. Of course, Israel wants peace. They want a piece of Jordan, a piece of Saudi Arabia, a piece of Lebanon, a piece of every nation that surrounds them.
I stand corrected.
In fact, they want another piece of Jerusalem, I understand.
Yeah, that's what this new settlement is they're trying to basically block off Jerusalem all for themselves. And, you know, then they want to basically tear down the Dome of the Rock, and they want to put the 3rd temple there, and that will mean the Messiah will return, and all this other stuff that they like to talk about.
I just thought I'd put that little peace program forward.
Well, it makes a tremendous amount of sense here. That's Israel's definition of Mideast peace, as we get a piece of everything out there. John, thank you very much. We're going to let you go and squeeze in one more phone call this segment. Werner in New Brunswick. Aloha, Werner. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mike. I just listened there about, you brought up the issue about Israel and Kerry and about peace talks and so. How can there be peace the way the Israeli government or this pseudo-government has behaved in itself? Anybody who has any senses left in his head, let them just have a look at the map of the land of Palestine and the succession since 1945 about the land theft from the Palestinian people.
Well, the other problem with having peace talks is that Israel has this horrible track record of simply not keeping to their agreements, whether it was Oslo or Camp David. You know, the Western media is always saying, oh, the Palestinians have to keep their commitments, the Palestinians have to keep their commitments. Israel's breaking their agreements left and right. Nobody ever calls them on it.
How can there be any kind of a peace talk with a criminal entity like the State of Israel?
There really can't, and of course it's very obvious Israel is not genuinely interested in peace talks. It's merely a device that they put out there to say, see, we're not the bad guys here. We want peace. It's just those gosh darn Palestinians won't give us our just rights, blah, blah, blah. And it's all political posturing. I mean, you know, again, you're right. Look at the maps of Israel and Palestine since Israel's founding today, and it's very obvious it is Israel wiping Palestine off the map, not the other way around. Werner, got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, probably you remember not too long ago where the governments of Iran and Argentina decided to get together and reinvestigate, take another look at this bombing of the Jewish Center in Buenos Aires in 1994, where the bomb went off and everybody said, oh, Iran did it, Iran did it. Iran said, no, we had nothing to do with it, and finally Iran and Argentina said, all right, we're going to take another look at this thing. Maybe there was a rush to judgment. And remember the firestorm of criticism and condemnation. How dare you question the Orthodox revealed wisdom that Iran is the bad guy? Harumph, 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 harumph. And now we know why they were just wetting their pants over the possibility of a new investigation, because apparently the chief suspect in this bombing is one Carlos Vladimir Korak, who was the Interior Minister of Argentina, and yes, he's Jewish, and yes, he's a supporter of Israel, and apparently there is a record of a $400,000 payment to Carlos Teldin, the auto mechanic who provided the bomb. And so now they're investigating this angle where it wasn't just a bunch of Iranian whatever. The money trail goes to Argentina's own interior minister, who was an Israeli asset in place inside the government. A cautionary tale for any government that allows dual nationals and dual citizens and Zionists into power in their government. So this, now we know why. I mean, we suspected why Israel was making such screeching, high-pitched, annoy the dog noises over this joint Iranian-Argentinian investigation. Because now they've gone back and taken a look at that. It's another false flag attack. Let's blow something up and blame Iran. Let's blow something up and blame Egypt. Let's attack the USS Liberty and blame Egypt for that. Let's blow up all kinds of stuff and blame whatever. It's the classic pattern of Israeli foreign policy, the false flag attack. Lavon affair, classic example of one that they got caught doing. When they got caught doing that, the first thing they screamed is, "Oh, it's the anti-Semites! It's a plot! It's a conspiracy by the anti-Semites! The anti-Semites are making us look bad!" Interestingly enough, a senior Israeli foreign press officer was touring the United States, and he made his last stop down in Miami on Thursday, and basically out there saying that, you know, Jews living in America have to start, you know, more outreach to try and get the media to show Israel in a positive light and Israel's enemies in a negative light here. You know, and Israel is aware they're losing the battle for favorable world opinion, mostly because of how they're acting. And they don't want to change how they're behaving. They just don't want people to talk about it. So what this guy's basically telling these people in his audience is, you got to go out there and scream anti-Semite until your lungs bleed. And it's a panic reaction. It's probably the reason last week we were getting all these phone calls from this guy or guys, I'm not sure if it was the same guy or not, screaming, "Oh, you're a Jew-hating network. That's all they know how to do. They can't argue the facts. They can't argue the logic. They can't argue the law. They can't argue the morality. So they just sit there and scream, "Oh, you're a Hitler lover. You're a Hitler lover." Anyway, a lot of people have been talking about how all of a sudden major international satellite providers are taking Press TV off the air. And it's been traced back to pressure from the United States of America. They don't want Press TV visible in Western Afghanistan. We're starting to see this sort of censorship thing all over the globe. The U.S. is cutting off their own military from Press TV, from The Guardian, from anybody carrying the NSA story. They cut the military off from WhatReallyHappened.com, which doesn't stop them from getting here through proxies. But it basically evinces a design by the U.S. government to control what information you are allowed to see. And that, too, is dictatorship. And that, too, is a violation of the First Amendment. The International Telecommunications Satellite Organization has called on the United States to suspend efforts to take certain groups or nations off of the communication satellites. And again, it's a violation of the First Amendment for the U.S. government to be doing so. But at this point, with the NSA scandal and everything else, it's obvious this government absolutely hates the Constitution. They're looking for a way to get rid of it. Remember, we saw, I think it was 4 months ago now, we saw these trial balloon stories out in the New York Times and MSNBC that it's just time to get rid of that Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It gets in the way of the efficient operation of the United States government. Well, you've got to hand it to them. The Nazis were also incredibly efficient once they were freed from anything respecting the civil rights of the population. Do we want that kind of efficiency in the United States? I don't think so. We're going to grab a couple of phone calls here. Danny in South Carolina. Aloha, Danny. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Danny, are you there?
Yes, hello.
There you are. Hello. Welcome to the show. You're on the air.
Thank you. I'm getting more and more concerned about the total silence regarding the pending bill S-462 and the previous versions, which have now become public law in the U.S., like 22 U.S.C. 8603 U.S. Code. Apparently, it is the law of the land here that we need to supply Israel with weapons. We need to offer the Air Force training and exercise opportunities. We need to work to expand Israel's role with NATO. We need to continue what they call our already close cooperation with Israel in security mechanisms and the exchange of information, including, by the way, satellite eavesdropping. They don't use the word eavesdropping, satellite monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently we need to open our borders to Israel if this S-462 passes, giving them a visa waiver. But it gets even worse than that. It says here that we are committed to pay for any and all weapons that they need to maintain a military edge in the region.
Which is nonsense. I'm sorry for interrupting you, and I'll let you continue for a minute. It's nonsense because as of last week, the Knesset openly was debating and discussing Israel's nuclear arsenal. And they are the only nuclear-armed state in the Middle East. They've already got this qualitative edge over all their neighbors. They don't need any more of our money. They're just... Israel, because they've corrupted and subverted our entire government, they're simply strip mining the United States for every little bit of wealth they can, and when the United States collapses in this dried out husk, Israel will simply hop onto a new host on which to parasitize, and it looks like Canada's next on their list. And it's absolute complete nonsense that Israel even needs it. They want it. They're greedy. They want, we want more. We want more. What did you do for us last week? Double it this week. But Israel doesn't need it, and Israel's, with this history of belligerence, they're the cause of all these wars. They can't go 6 months without bombing somebody over there. And we're supposed to go on paying for it all?
Well, let me tell you something. There were 7 co-sponsors on March the 6th when this thing first hit the floor. Now there are 42. They're adding on the average of, about 1.5 per week. Now there are 43 co-sponsors. How are they doing it? How do they,
there's one of two things going on. Either AIPAC is going over to these people and saying, sponsor this or you get no more of our money for your re-election campaign next year, or they're getting phone calls in the middle of the night replaying very juicy excerpts of private phone calls that they just as soon not have made public.
One last thing, Michael.
Yes.
It says here that the U.S. Senate agrees that we will veto any and all resolutions at the Security Council level against Israel. How can
that's a violation of the separation of powers right there. Congress
it says it right here.
I know it says it, but Congress is not authorized to set foreign policy. That's strictly the executive branch. And I have no doubt the executive branch is going to go on vetoing any United Nations Security Council resolutions against Israel, but that is a policy that is supposed to be set by the White House, not the Congress.
Okay, I just wanted to register. I just wanted to ring the bell one more time because apparently it's getting deeper and deeper, and we are losing our sovereignty here. We are occupied.
We're a slave state to Israel at this point. Yes.
Thank you very much, Michael.
All right, we're going to switch over to Mark in Georgia. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, sir. Religio is from the Latin, and it means to bind back together, and it's a good thing to be bound back to the Creator. It's a bad thing to be bound back to things that falsely fraudulently claim to be of the Creator when they're not, like a bunch of man-made rules.
Mm-hmm.
Because good religion is about self-control, and bad religion is, I'm going to try to take control over you, and saying that if you don't obey rules that I pretend are from God, then, you know, it's like one person has authority. I think you can respect what Christ said is, do not fear those who can destroy your body, and that's all they can do. But fear him who can destroy your body and your soul in hell. In other words, that line from Sympathy for the Devil, I'll lay your soul to waste. It's like, Satan, you can't do that. You may get a person killed, but that's as far as you can go, and even then, only if the Creator of the universe. And I'll tell you, the Creator is really unhappy with these hypocrites, these 501c3 corporations, because it's like, if you didn't know better, you should have. Because the way I like to define morality is being accountable to each other, knowing that ultimately we're accountable to the Creator. And the Creator is not fooled by any of these lies that we're being sold. And the reason why I use the term Creator is I don't want to get into the you know, if I use one label or another, then it would indicate that I'm with one particular camp or another. And I'm saying, well, we can all agree that he's the Creator. Some would say she's the Creator. I'm like, well, but the thing is that I understand your concern, because Karl Marx was raised Jewish, and entirely for business reasons, his family, quote unquote, converted to Christianity, and that set Karl off of religion for the rest of his life, because he's like, this is completely phony. We're not converting because of a genuine quest for truth or you know, seeking a relationship with our Maker. We're making this erstwhile conversion just for the business arrangements, not for anything legitimate. You can appreciate where, you know, that really set him off on that, right?
Well, I certainly can from my own family history. I mean, my family was originally Jewish up until the 1490s when the Inquisition got going in Spain, and forcibly, you know, you were given a choice: leave Spain and leave all your wealth behind, or convert. And my family converted, and, you know, if it hadn't been for the Inquisition, I would have been a rich Hollywood Jew today.
Yeah, well, you know, I look at the so-called conversion of Ruse in 988 A.D., where, to cut to the chase, basically Prince Vlad decided, well, I want to have a monotheistic religion. He gathered representatives together, and he basically threw out Islam and Judaism because they both forbade pork, and Islam forbids alcohol as well. And so it was down to Christian, Greek Orthodox or Roman Catholic, and he went to a Roman Catholic shrine, and it was dingy and unimpressive. And then he went to a Greek Orthodox shrine, and it's like, look at the art, look at the architecture. I want my religion to be like this. He went back home and decreed that everyone must report to the river to be baptized or be considered an enemy of crown and state. In other words, you can either get dunked in water or you can get your head cut off.
Well, we saw that in Khazaria in 800 A.D., where their ruling structure wanted to engage in trade with both the Muslims and the Christians in order to maximize their profitability, and the only way they could do that is if it was a Jewish nation, and that was the economic basis underneath that conversion. So these things happen all the time, and there's always money behind it. Anyway, Mark, thank you very much. Going to let you go here. Got to get on to some other stories here. And by the way, before we get back to the stories, again, I'm looking around the corporate media nonstop. It's all Zimmerman all the time. They are selling this case. And again, I need all of you listening to this show, as you talk to people about the Zimmerman case, please tell them that riots that might follow the verdict in this case are something the federal government wants so they can declare a national emergency, shred what is left of the Constitution, and establish this fascist dictatorship that the money junkies think is what life is supposed to be like here on planet Earth here. Now, getting back to the economy, which is behind all of this stuff here. Story over at moneynews.com talking about how even though the stock market is still being manipulated up high there, and it started high in the morning, it's probably going to end in the green, but not by much today. But basically saying the insiders are well aware that there is a massive correction coming, and they're trying to basically dump their stock on the suckers and get out while the getting is good. Just put up a story a little while ago about yet another poll. This came out of MarketWatch, saying that most stock market professionals are overwhelmingly the opinion that a correction has to happen. If not this year, then certainly next year. I don't think it's going to make it to the end of this year. Meanwhile, interesting story out of the Examiner. As you're probably aware, a lot of this disaster relates to a piece of legislation called Glass-Steagall. Now, the crash of 1929 was created in much the same way as our current economic crisis. Investment banks, which are privately owned, private investors, were allowed to merge with depositor banks and started playing reckless high speculation games with depositor money, and that's what led to these bank failures. Glass-Steagall was put in place to keep a wall between depositor banks, who are constrained by law into only safe, sure, reliable investments, and investor banks, which are privately owned, privately funded, that are allowed to basically do anything they feel like doing, and they'll make the money and they'll eat the losses. Now, in 1999, the U.S. government, the finest government that money can buy, repealed Glass-Steagall. And it was done under political pressure because of the aftermath of the Citigroup merger, which merged private investment banking with a depositor bank. It was a violation of Glass-Steagall, and rather than go back and say this merger should not have happened, we got to split you up, Congress said, we'll just repeal Glass-Steagall and all will be well. And immediately you saw a firestorm of private investor banks and depositor banks merging, getting into each other's line of work and starting investing in reckless investments like the mortgage-backed security bundles. So why is Glass-Steagall still repealed? We'll be right back. And aloha, welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about Glass-Steagall, which was a law that was enacted in the wake of the Depression of the 1930s to try and keep the banking industry safe for depositors by putting a wall between low-risk depositor bank investment and the high-risk ventures that depositor banks are able to do because it's their own money they're playing with. Now, Glass-Steagall was repealed in 1999, and of course it triggered a firestorm of extremely reckless Wall Street behavior that pretty much destroyed the economy, at least for those of us in the 99% here. And so lately in Congress, especially during last year's election cycle, there was talk about reinstituting Glass-Steagall and bringing back regulation to Wall Street. And of course, Wall Street hates regulation. They don't want to be on a leash. They want to be able to go out and just feed at will on the wealth of the people of the world. Apparently, over in Delaware, they were trying to put forth a state bill that would basically re-implement Glass-Steagall. And under heavy pressure from the banking industry, the state lawmakers basically ended their 2013 legislative session without voting on this. It's being blocked. The bankers are still fighting. I don't know why they're even thinking about putting it back in right now. The damage has been done. The economy is wrecked. The money junkies have all the wealth of this nation, and it's going downhill, but still, no, we can't have regulation. Of course you have to have regulation. Bankers do not exist to serve the community. They have no instinct for serving society. Bankers exist to make themselves rich on the labor of others. That's it. That's what they do. Not too long ago, I think it was the Colbert Report, did this wonderful little segment on comparing Wall Street with Canadian banking. And the overt issue was to go up and poke fun at Canada for all their pointless banking regulation. But they did a wonderful job of underscoring the fact that Canada seems to avoid these major banking crashes that happen with alarming regularity here in the United States of America. And I hope somebody's got the YouTube video for that, because I'd like to put that up at whatreallyhappened.com. And it really hammered home the point that government is supposed to balance the needs between businessmen and the general population to find what is best for the nation as a whole. Our government has clearly abandoned that agenda and now serves the money junkies in full heart, faith, and soul, as it were. The Eurozone economy has shrunk for a 7th straight quarter. And this is the longest economic slump in Europe since the end of World War II. So how's that private central bank thing working out for you? We were talking about last week, we're over in Britain. they're back to recommending to young women just out of college and with all their student loans, hey, you ought to consider a career as strippers or pole dancers or lap dancers or escort service, and we're not implying prostitution. But hey, they make good money, and that's all that really matters. We have no other concerns in our society other than you make money to give to the bankers. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. 800-313-9443. Dan the Man is now in our control room taking care of us. And remember, the more you call in, the less you have to listen to me. And oh my goodness, the phones are lighting up like a Christmas tree. Kent in West Virginia. Aloha, Kent. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, just a quick comment about your comment about the Canadian banks. Just the last couple of days, I've seen that the regulator, the person, the government official up there that regulates the Canadian banks, his name is Carney, C-A-R-N-E-Y or K-E-R-N-E-Y, I guess. He has now been appointed the head of the Bank of England, and it's the first time in the 300-some-year history of the Bank of England that hasn't been an Englishman. So that tells you that at least the Brits see the problem, I guess, maybe, and see somebody that's doing a good job, and so. We can't down here in the United States can't do it, but even the Brits are doing it, I guess.
Well, I think pretty much everybody on the inside understands that the actual model of a privately owned central bank issuing all of the public currency as a loan at interest is a formula for disaster in the long term. And when these were all being set up, it wasn't a problem because the people setting them up were getting incredibly wealthy without really providing much of anything except ink and paper, and everybody say, when it falls apart, we'll be dead and gone, and we don't really care what happens back then. But now we're down the road, and the whole system is hovering at the edge of collapse, and because of globalism, it hovers at the edge of a global collapse. And it will be a wonderful opportunity to kick this model of banking out, consign it to the dustbin of history, and say public currency must be a public utility. Period. End of discussion.
All right, well, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks a lot for the phone call. Now, interesting little story came out of Pravda. Europe is looking at introducing a second euro. Okay? And what they're talking about is there is now going to be 2 euros. There'll be 1 euro for the economically healthy countries, like Germany and the Netherlands, and then there'll be the existing euro, which is rapidly devaluing because of Greece and Cyprus and all these other trouble areas in Europe. And this is a scam. This second euro, the euro for the chosen, is to allow these countries like Germany and the Netherlands to basically, for all intents and purposes, go back to their own internal currency, while pretending that a default on the euro has not taken place. Because that would trigger all those credit default swaps sold by Wall Street. And they're looking for a way to allow Europe to fragment and still pretend, oh, it's all still a single zone and a single currency, and there has been no default, so all those people who purchased those credit default swaps can be told to go pound sand. And that's all this is. Doesn't matter what they call it in Germany and the Netherlands. They're going to their own internal currencies. And calling it the euro doesn't hide the fact that the euro as a whole is starting to fragment and fall apart. But they will lie, cheat, and steal to keep their little money games going. There's absolutely no sense of honor among the bankers. The idea that bankers are honest and reliable and trustworthy is just part of the ad sales campaign. They want you to believe you can trust the bankers. Ask that of the people of Cyprus right now, if you can actually do that here. Let's see. Unemployment in the Eurozone has hit a new record high. And here in the United States of America, the homeless population in Los Angeles County increased by 16% over the last 2 years. Don't tell us the economy is in a recovery. Things are great for the 1%. For everybody else, it's still crud. Going to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we leave the economic news, I want to reprise a story we talked about last Friday. Now, last Thursday, the United States Senate passed their immigration reform bill, which included instant amnesty for all the illegal aliens in this country. And what I think was a horrible insult to us legal citizens, because I was born in Boston, the Senate immigration bill included financial incentives for employers to hire the newly amnestied immigrants over the lifelong or naturalized U.S. citizens. In other words, it's not enough that a whole 30-some-odd million instant potential workers are being created that will flood an already strained job market. But the United States Congress is going to pay employers to hire these new amnestied illegals ahead of you, using your tax dollars. The Senate isn't dipping into their own wallet to do this. They're taking the tax dollars from legal American citizens and giving it to employers to hire the newly amnestied illegals ahead of you, the American taxpayer. You should be very incensed about this. For one thing, it's a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, creating this favored group of people to get favored treatment and prejudicial hiring. Now, the good news is it looks like the immigration bill is dead on arrival in the House of Representatives. Now, the corporate media, at least on Fox News, has taken a brief respite from all Zimmerman all the time, and they're back to talking about this obvious public relations propaganda push by the White House to convince America that Obamacare is really swell and wonderful and you should sign up for it, in the face of growing evidence that it is far more expensive than you thought it was going to be. It's far more of a paperwork hassle than people were led to be. Apparently, Obamacare is even larger than the IRS tax code. And we know what a monstrous waste of trees that turned out to be. And so they're talking about how there's financial incentives going out to libraries so that librarians will be pushing Obamacare. They're getting all these, hip celebrities to say, oh, Obamacare is wonderful. They've enlisted the NBA and the NFL. And they're just trying to get star power to say, yes, you young people need to sign up for this whole thing. Now, if Obamacare was really a good thing, the Obama administration wouldn't need to be doing this. We, the American people, would look at Obamacare and say, yeah, this works for us. This helps us deal with the problems of expensive, skyrocketing health care in America. But ordinary Americans are looking at Obamacare, and they're seeing their premiums go up. They're seeing a flood of gratuitous, pointless paperwork, along with more privacy violations into your lifestyle as part of Obamacare. They see it as another cash grab, given that it is the Internal Revenue Service that gets to administer Obamacare. What does the IRS know about medical treatment or illness, other than the heartburn that everybody experiences filling out those 1040 forms? It's another cash grab. It's a present to all those insurance companies that were generous campaign supporters of Barack Obama's candidacy. Government, if they're doing the job for the people, don't need sales campaigns. They don't need propaganda. They'll put out this idea and they'll say, this is what we want to do. And the American people look at it and say, yeah, that makes sense. We'll sign up. When you're seeing a huge propaganda push, whether it's selling Obamacare or selling Saddam's nuclear weapons, you know the government is lying to you and it's not for your benefit. There's no such thing as lying to you for your benefit. They're lying for the benefit of the money junkies, like they always have. Now, over in Colorado, as of today, July 1st, Colorado's new draconian gun control laws have gone into effect. And the people of Colorado are very angry. They've gotten enough signatures on the petition to recall some of these offending legislators, and they should. It's supposed to be a representational government. You represent us or you find another job. Now, one company in Colorado that was manufacturing high-capacity magazines that are now banned by Colorado law spent the weekend giving them away for free. People going into the gun stores, there was a big box of high-capacity magazines saying you might as well take one for free because on Monday we can't sell them anymore. And so this so-called Colorado ban on high-capacity magazines has resulted in a net increase in the number of high-capacity magazines out there. Little story I want to go back on. This was from 2012. Back in March of 2012, President Obama signed an executive order which, among other things, gives the federal government authority over every resource and infrastructure element in the United States in the event of a national emergency. Oh, those Zimmerman people are rioting. We're activating all the emergency orders, and you now have to do what we tell you to do. And this basically means that the U.S. government could come in and grab your food stockpile that you have set aside for economic hardship or hurricanes or, you know, a natural disaster happens and FEMA shows up and they're hungry and you've got to feed them on top of everything else here. And the reason I mention this is because Saturday when my wife and I were over at the local, let's see, Dan, are we still connected with, are we still connected? Can you hear me? Because it looks like we just lost our, okay, we're still on the air. Whoop, no, we're not. Okay, I'm going to have to restart Skype here. For those of you on Justin TV, bear with me. It's the NSA flipping the bird at us yet one more time. And okay, we're going to bringing it back. Skype just completely crashed. There was an update to Skype this last week, and the new version seems buggy as all heck. We were trying to talk with our niece and nephew who are living in England, and it took 3 tries to get this thing up here. And let's see if we can get a connection. And hang on a second. Okay, are we back here? Can you hear me, Dan? Oh, no, we're not. Let's try. Here we are, trying to reconnect. Boy, don't you just love living in this third world techno... There we are. We are back again. All righty. So, we are now back here on our...
New Move Free Ultra Omega, a revolutionary omega-3 formula for 2 times better joint
All right,
comfort.
hang on a second.
Healthy joints, Move Free. Also from Move Free, joint health is yummy with new Move Free gummies.
Okay, so we're good and we're back and connected after our Skype-ness issues here. Let me get my window back into place so I can see my little text messages. And there we are. So over the weekend, Saturday, my wife and I went down to the local Sam's Club. And we saw a huge floor display of emergency food. Big, huge plastic bin with something like 300 freeze-dried meals inside it. And people were buying it. And I think it's a sign of the times where everybody realizes we are on the verge of some serious social economic upheaval. And apparently under that FEMA, that emergency order that Obama signed in 2012, if you've bought and stockpiled a bunch of food, the government can come and grab it, unless you're ready to defend it. And again, I'm not encouraging anybody to initiate violence against the government, but prudence demands that you be prepared to defend yourself and your family and your food and your home when the government initiates violence against you, and it looks like they're getting ready to, with all that hollow point ammunition they've been buying. Now, Obama, on his speech Saturday, was out there once again pounding on this issue of global warming. This is being reported over here in Stephen Goddard, WordPress.com. Global warming is wrecking the United States. Now, right now, 75% of the United States is below normal temperatures for this time of year. And Obama is out there saying that only dictatorial action by his White House is going to save the United States from overheating. By the way, you probably noticed over the weekend, all the carbon Nazis are over there in the American West where there's all these huge wildfires going on, and they're standing downwind, holding up a thermometer and saying, see, this proves global warming. It's hot in the desert in summer. Like that's a news flash. And they're trying to say, oh, it's record this and record that. You know, I used to live in Southern California, and I'm very familiar with the deserts in the summer. And yes, it gets triple-digit temperatures all the time. Meanwhile, the reality is that the Arctic is having the coldest summer on record. Since records started being kept, the Arctic is colder for this time of year than at any... Oh, boy, Skype is giving us another bit of problems here. I don't know what's going on with them. Can you still hear me? Dan, can you let me know that you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to let the error message sit there, and hopefully we'll keep our connection for the rest of the show. All righty, we're going to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about Obama out there saying global warming is wrecking the United States here, even as we have record cold summer in the Arctic. And over in Norway, over the weekend, they had a freak snowstorm. This is end of June, beginning of July, middle of summer. The snowstorm was so intense that people couldn't see the roads. There were car accidents where people literally drove off the road because they couldn't see for all the snow. And still they're out there pushing, oh, global warming, you've got to give us carbon tax money, you've got to do what we tell you. And all the prognostications of the global warming cult from 10 years ago, they didn't happen. Snow is not a thing of the past. We've got more snow and more snow and more snow. The Arctic ice is expanding. Good news for all those polar bears that Al Gore insisted was going to drown. Over at the Metropolitan, or rather the Meteorological Office in Great Britain, the Met Office, they're finally backpedaling and saying that climate change might actually be caused by climate change. Meaning they're backing away from this idea that human activity really has a significant effect on what's going on, because CO2 in the atmosphere has gone up. We're actually seeing increased plant growth of food crops as a result, but the world has cooled. And remember, NASA came out and basically acknowledged carbon dioxide in the atmosphere does not behave like a pane of glass in a greenhouse. It actually acts as a coolant. Carbon dioxide, which is necessary and beneficial for plant growth, is actually acting as a global cooling system. So now we're getting these reports out. This was over at Space Daily saying that, well, global cooling, that's still a problem, and we've got to deal with that. Now that carbon dioxide is cooling the planet, we've got to tax carbon dioxide or there'll be a new ice age. They're making it up as they go along. They don't know what they're talking about. Our government, our politicians, our money junkies, our corporations are using scientists the way ancient governments used priests. Here's a guy in a robe, believe what he says and then do what we tell you. Today it's believe in this guy in a white lab coat tells you and then do what we tell you to do. Ruling you with beliefs. Apparently these fires over in Arizona are very intense. 19 firefighters lost. Major property damage. Apparently half of one town completely burned up. And as I said, we've got all the carbon Nazis downwind from the fire holding their thermometers up in the smoke saying, see, we've got triple-digit temperatures. It's getting hot here. Yes, it's hot. Half the place is on fire. Remember when we found that photo of an official NOAA temperature recording station right next to a trash incinerator? Yeah, it's that overt and obvious how they're trying to rig the numbers. Pay no attention to the snow and ice that piled up last winter. It's getting warmer. You must believe as we tell you to believe and give us your carbon money and your obedience. Raising on a busted flush here. A lot of people still screaming about this very bizarre World Food Prize awarded to Monsanto, and apparently Monsanto funds the World Food Prize to give to themselves in what is basically a public relations stunt. We, Monsanto, are worried about the world's food. We've got this prize to show you, so you should trust us when we tell you what we do is really good. And yet, again, continuing surfacing of evidence that glyphosate, which is that Roundup weed killer, is highly toxic to animals and to humans. Remember when Monsanto launched glyphosate and Roundup and said it's safer than table salt and non-toxic? What a complete joke that was. And yet, 2 weeks ago, the EPA raised the maximum allowable exposure to glyphosate for human consumption. The stuff is provably bad for you. People are complaining, and the EPA is saying, it's okay, we're going to raise the limit so we can say you're still exposed to a safe level of glyphosate. There is no safe level. Just like radiation. Remember after Fukushima, and the EPA and the USDA raised the limit of maximum exposure to radiation? You know, you shouldn't be concerned until it crosses our official government benchmark. Until then, you're just whining and crying and blah, 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 blah. Now, remember where we talked about how the cafeteria at Monsanto itself will not serve GMO products. The White House will not serve GMO products. Now we're finding out that Parliament, the restaurants in Parliament in Great Britain, will not serve GMO. It's banned there. At the same time, the British government is telling their people, oh, the genetically modified corn is great for you. Genetically modified wheat is great. Genetically modified everything. You will love this stuff, and you should eat it. It's just we in Parliament really have second thoughts about it. We're going to grab a phone call here. George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, flashback, Mike, I got to look up the article, but the reason why we got these wildfires in Colorado is the mismanagement of the federal government owning these lands, or claiming ownership of these lands.
Yes. Okay, George, we got to take a break for commercials. Don't go away. I want you to come back because, yes, this is an important topic. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I know we got callers waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you in just a minute, but a couple of stories about Monsanto I got to follow up on. This is a very alarming trend. Apparently over in Europe, because of some kind of a loophole technicality in European patent law, Monsanto has been granted a patent on broccoli. Not GMO broccoli they made themselves, the natural, from nature, organic, in the wild, been in existence for millions of years broccoli is now a patented, owned product by Monsanto in Europe. What is the legal justification for doing that? And it sets a dangerous trend. Is Monsanto going to patent organic, natural, non-GMO corn and wheat? Is Monsanto simply going to own all of the foodstuffs on Earth by patent law? Patent is supposed to protect something you have developed yourself. And here we have the European Patent Office allowing Monsanto to patent heritage food crops that they did not create, that they see as enemies and challenges to their GMO dominance of the world. What are they thinking over there? Now, Monsanto is still trying to claim that there is no link between their experimental GMO wheat fields in the United States and the contamination of the wheat field up in Oregon. Monsanto is saying, oh, it's a plot, it's a conspiracy. Somebody snuck into our GMO wheat fields years ago and saved some of the pollen and then went out to Oregon and spread it on the field so that Monsanto would look bad, like Monsanto needs any help in that department. And they're out there saying it was impossible for there to be a link between their test GMO wheat fields and Oregon because they maintain what is called a buffer zone, an area of bare ground around the GMO wheat so that the pollen can't spread to adjoining fields. I'm sorry, has Monsanto never heard of birds or insects or animals that will go in and munch on whatever you're growing and then travel? That's their entire justification for that. All right, we're going to grab some phone calls here. Jim in Arizona. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Listen, this is a Charlotte. You had a caller calling about 3 or 4 callers ago, and he mentioned a new bill which was giving away the sovereignty of the United States. Do you recall the bill number? I wanted to pursue that and do more research on it.
Unfortunately, I don't, but you can probably listen to the podcast after the show is over. I'll be putting that up on my server, and you can get it from that, or maybe somebody can email it in, and I'll post it to the front of whatreallyhappened.com.
Yeah, that's a really good one you ought to put on there.
Yeah, it is amazing just how blatant the service of the United States government to Israel is. And again, this idea that we have to protect poor, helpless little Israel is nonsense. Israel is now officially acknowledging they are a nuclear power. They've discussed it in the Knesset. It's not a secret anymore. Israel is the only nuclear-armed state in the region. They have a qualitative edge over their enemies. They don't really need any more support from the United States of America. They just want it. They want the money. They want the goodies to keep on coming. Right now, the American people have been forced to give Israel more than 4 times the entire cost of the Apollo moon program, and we're not going to get a giant leap for mankind out of all that money, or even something like Velcro.
I think they ought to rename the capital in Washington Knesset West.
A lot of people have said that. A lot of people have said that.
It just goes to show, Mike, how much Israel and these AIPAC really own and control and rule America.
They do. And I remember when I was a kid in grade school, we were getting all this propaganda about beware of communist subversion. The communists are coming to subvert our government. And our government was being subverted. We were just looking in the wrong direction.
Yep. Okay, well, listen, keep up the great work, buddy, and I will be looking for that bill.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Jason in Ohio. Aloha, Jason. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I got a related story to your Monsanto here. A friend of mine was talking to a local farmer this weekend, and he told them that he had planted a cover crop of beans. I guess he saved some non-Roundup ready seeds, you know, a little nitrogen fixation going on there. And when he got ready to get rid of the beans, he went and sprayed them all with Roundup, and none of them died.
Okay, so there's GMO beans out there, obviously.
So, yep,
well,
I guess that stuff's getting in.
Well, one of the problems that we need to be aware of is it's already been discovered that the altered gene that makes the Roundup-ready crops immune to glyphosate is migrating into weeds. There's a whole new generation of super weeds that the glyphosate will not work on. So these farmers are having to go back to using all these highly toxic herbicides and weed killers, which they thought they were never going to have to do if they went with the Roundup system. So now they're stuck with all the downsides of the Roundup-ready crops, and no benefit. Their yields are lower. The crops are less resistant to drought. They're suffering higher losses. And, of course, now they're having to go back to this very toxic chemical-based pest control. And it's just an absolute unmitigated disaster for farmers. Okay?
I have to say I work in landscaping, do a lot of weed spraying myself. And even though they reformulate it from time to time, combine it with different salts and whatnot, and to get it to dissolve, the weeds are taking longer and longer to die anyway, so it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, it is. It's happening. You know, you can't fool Mother Nature. And
no, she's got one up on us.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest single mistake in philosophy coming out of Monsanto, in fact, all these biotech firms, was this idea that they can just go into nature and tinker with one part, and nothing other than that part will change. And that is simply not the way nature works. Nature adapts, nature evolves, and the entire biosphere is reacting to all of these chemicals and modified genes in ways that nobody predicted because they weren't looking. They weren't looking to see what are the possible harmful effects of our products in the long term. They just want to get it out on the market. And this tinkering with the code of life is the most dangerous technology that man has ever played with, and it's being handled in an extraordinarily irresponsible manner. And I keep getting back to this whole thing about the epicite corn. This was a corn that was genetically engineered, funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This corn produces spermicides. In other words, if you eat it, your body starts producing antibodies that will kill sperm, renders men infertile, renders women incapable of conceiving. And if this epicite gene broke into the wild, or has broken into the wild, we're looking at a potential extinction level event. But not to worry. I'm sure Monsanto is already busily developing their Roundup Ready baby, so that those of you who want children will simply go to them and buy a brand new baby. And in fact, we had this story that came out of the Daily Mail where apparently there are already 30 healthy babies who are GM. These are babies that were created in a lab with DNA from what they're loosely saying 3 parents, and they're already being born. Genetically modified babies. You can't have babies by the old natural method anymore. You will have to buy your babies from a corporation. And they're just treating this technology so recklessly. I know a lot of people are always saying, well, if there's alien super civilizations out there, why aren't they visiting the planet Earth here? And my first response is, what do we have they'd be interested in? With apologies to Stephen Hawking, I know he's out there saying we shouldn't be advertising our presence out there to the galaxy. It could be dangerous. And my response is, what do we have that's worth the cost of invading? Not a whole heck of a lot. But the other situation is maybe in the history of intelligent technological civilizations, they reach a point where they start playing with their own life code, and their first mistake is their last one. Especially with this epicyte gene. If it broke into the wild the same way that Monsanto's GMO wheat did, we could be approaching a point where anybody with corn in their diet is permanently sterilized. And Monsanto will be selling Roundup-ready babies. That'll cure the world's overpopulation. And apparently, Michael E. Arth has come out there with an interview saying that we should cure overpopulation with birth credits. It worked with carbon dioxide and carbon credits. We'll have birth credits, and we'll buy and sell the birth credits through brokerages the way they were buying and selling carbon credits, and the brokerages will make tons and tons of money. Boy, these people just never quit, do they? Just do not quit. Interesting little story from naturalnews.com. There's been an experimental program for a vaccine for HIV. And apparently this study began in 2009 involving HVTN 505, which is this proposed vaccine against HIV. 41 of the volunteers on this trial came down with HIV from the vaccine itself. Now, a lot of people have been talking about how your so-called yearly mammograms to detect breast cancer may actually be causing more breast cancer than they detect and prevent. But it's big business, it's big money to get the women coming in every single year for another one of those mammograms. Apparently, hospitals and cancer centers are now throwing parties for women, you know, with prizes and food and even alcoholic beverages to get the women to come on in and say, yes, take off your shirt, clamp your breasts in here and let us radiate you under the guise of saving lives. It's not about saving lives, it's about keeping the cash flow going. Let's see. Little story, I mentioned this I think last week. 80% of prepackaged foods in the United States grocery stores are banned in other countries because of all these GMO content, the chemical content, all of these additives that are in there, all the fillers. We wonder why America continues to get sicker and sicker over time, which is a wonderful profit opportunity for corporate medicine. We need you sick, we need you ill, we need you symptomatic, and we'll treat your symptoms. We won't cure the disease. We're not going to cut off our own revenue stream, but we'll make you feel better about all these illnesses you got from all these chemicals in the food. The USDA is now approving 3 new slaughterhouses to slaughter horses for meat for human consumption here in the United States of America. Call it Soylent Brown. And the reason it's an interesting development is because back during the Depression of the 1930s, horse meat was approved for sale for human consumption. It's another indicator that our nation is definitely heading into a decline. And I'm not saying horse meat is bad. It's a little unforgiving when you're trying to cook it. But it's just an idea that what will it be next? Dogs and cats? Will they deal with all those animals that are in the shelters there? You see all these commercials. Please send us money to help these animals in these humane shelters. I'd rather spend our money feeding our human children. I mean, I love dogs, don't get me wrong, but we got to prioritize, and our kids have to come first. Have you ever noticed all these commercials about starving children in all these other places around the world? You never see one about starving children here in America. They don't want you thinking about that. They want to go on selling the lie that things are much worse in other parts of the country. We've got to send them money. No, we have to spend our money feeding our children here in the United States of America. Apparently over in the European Union, they're looking at rescinding regulations regarding medical testing on patients in hospitals to eliminate the need for informed consent, which is going to be great for the pharmaceutical industry and various researchers. You're sick in the hospital and the doctor comes in and says, I got to stick this in your arm. What for? You don't need to know. It'll make you feel better. Trust us. It's amazing stuff out there. Oh, let's see. Tap water contamination laced with antidepressants. We know that somewhere above 10% of the population are taking SSRIs. Those SSRIs that are not fully metabolized are excreted into the waste disposal system. Those water treatment plants are not designed to take out chemicals, pharmaceuticals. They just take out the solids. And so you go into any major city in the United States of America and you start testing the water, you find all kinds of pharmaceuticals in there that you're not supposed to be taking, but you're drinking them anyway. Back to the phones. Clayton in, I can't read the city because of this error message from Skype. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I'm calling you from Austin. Just a real quick point. I find it ironic that when Monsanto stuff blows onto an organic farm, it's the organic farmer's problem because it mixed their patented genes mixed with their organic seeds. But when the shoe's on the other foot, now they've got to defend this whole wheat issue. They've got all these procedures in place to keep it all contained on their own land. So I just find that really ironic.
Well, the situation is they didn't keep it contained. There was no way to keep it contained. And, you know, these GMO pollens, especially for products that are not approved for public use, this should be treated as an industrial accident, and Monsanto held to account for the cleanup costs.
Oh, definitely. No, I mean, if you ever seen the movie Food, Inc., I mean, seed savers have lost their livelihoods. People lost their farms or whatever because they get sued by Monsanto because their corn that they've been growing for generations is found with these genes in it. And they say, well, it's your fault because you should have, the gene shouldn't have been in your corn, even though we planted the field over here. And they've won. The Supreme Court has found in their favor. But when it comes to this whole wheat issue, that they said, oh no, we contained that. We had, we had all these rows around and these, dirt areas and everything. So there's no way it could have gotten out. I just find that just really, just the corporate spin is just.
It's another sign. It's another sign of fascism in this country, where the government is allied with these corporations against ordinary people. It is ludicrous to be suing these farmers because their fields were contaminated with these dangerous products, and yet Monsanto's obvious policy here is to monopolize food production on planet Earth. So, you don't have a right to food, just like Nestle says you don't have a right to water. It's all commoditized and corporatized, where you will work and you will get those pieces of paper and ink in order to eat tomorrow. And that is fascism, right there.
Totally. It's fascism. I'll let you go, Mike, to finish on out, but thanks for your show.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. Another article over at RINF.com, the alarming rise in suicide rates among veterans. It's the SSRIs. They're driving people crazy. But they're big money, so we're not going to question. Going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our show after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And another little story. This is out of CBS in Baltimore. Apparently, scientists have come up with a pill to cure gambling. We've gone from there's an app for that to there's a pill for that. And they're basically trying any possible aspect of human behavior, and I know gambling's an addiction. They're going to treat it with a pill. And if they make it work, the first place they should sell it is Wall Street, because those are the biggest gamblers of all, because they're playing with other people's money. Wall Street is this giant casino where you spin the wheel, and if you make money, you get to keep it. And if you go bust, they pass the hat around and say, we got to give this gambler more money. Who wouldn't frequent a casino like that? You don't get that deal in Las Vegas or Atlantic City. Only in Wall Street do you get to go on playing after you've lost everything, because it's not your money you're playing with. Amazing, amazing stuff here. Now, as I mentioned before, over the last weekend, we've had all these news reports across America about sizzling high record temperatures, and the good news is it didn't last. I just got sent this story from the Star-Telegram that there is a cool, dry front moving into the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which has ended this heat wave that the Carbonazis were waving around, and now they're saying they could even break the low temperature record for that region. So we had, what, 1 week of hot temperatures, and now it's already cooling. Around here, my wife and I were observing, it's already starting to feel like autumn here, and it's only July 1st. Oh, let's see. We were talking the other day about how the EPA dropped their study on whether fracking was contaminating groundwater. They were finding evidence that it was, and then they said, oh, we don't need to look at this anymore. We can't offend the fracking industry and the oil companies here. But apparently Duke University picked up the slack there, because they just released their study saying absolutely oil well fracking is contaminating the drinking water of the American people. Not a problem. Nestle is getting ready to sell you water for money instead of taking it out of the ground. Who wants to take water out of the ground or anything like that? You will buy your water in bottles from we, the giant corporations. After a while, you begin to see this image of the New World Order that's out there. You have no right to anything. You will work for your air. You'll work for your water. You don't grow it yourself. You don't drill your own wells. You don't even, you know, there are many states in this country right now where you can't even collect rainwater that falls on your property. Those are the king's raindrops, you knave. You're poaching the king's raindrops. We shall have you flogged. Get the cat of 8 tails. Isn't it the cat of 9 tails? It's old. It's old. It's old. We've been flogging way too many citizens here. New study out here that atheists commit fewer crimes, have longer marriages, and are more highly educated than people who believe in the imaginary playmate in the sky. I hear the music. It's time to get out of here and scream at the Skype people over their latest offering here. We'll be back tomorrow, July 2nd, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical. Please talk to your friends about avoiding riots in the Zimmerman case. It's what the government wants. That's your homework. Extra credit assigned. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.